Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great day. It's a great pleasure to be welcoming you all to our third roundtable with Elia. My name is Isabel Barakat. I'm a sophomore at Trinity. I'm majoring in biomedical engineering. I'm also the social media chair for Trinity College Entrepreneurship Club. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking your busy schedule to join us today. This event is organized by Trinity Entrepreneurial Network. As we all know, the Bantam Street has always been an entrepreneurial one. With our alumni body, we are proud to have many successful and aspiring entrepreneurs of all ages and in every career field. The Trinity Entrepreneurial Network provides a dedicated space for Trinity entrepreneurs to connect with each other and with current students. For more information, please contact Melissa Bronzino-Regan, and please check the chat for Melissa's email address. She's gonna put it in the chat, so please check that. I have a few housekeeping notes and announcements to make before we begin today's event. During Chris's presentation, we recommend that you set your view to speaker view and then switch to gallery view for the Q&A session. And please make sure that you're muted throughout Chris's presentation. Today's program is a part of a monthly series roundtable conversation with Trinity entrepreneurs on a topics of interest with two fellow entrepreneurs. We are pleased to welcome members of a student entrepreneur club and hope you will complete your profile on the Bantam Career Network to join the group specifically created to provide a space for alumni and students to post questions and seek advice. We will record this program. And please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or offer thoughts throughout the presentation. I'm gonna announce the coming events that are organized by Trinity Entrepreneurial Network next. On February 7th, we're gonna have a roundtable with Russell Fujade, class of 01, on how to turn your values to opportunity. March 10th, we're gonna have a roundtable with Michelle Monti, class of 89, on creating effective content to promote your business. Then April 6th, we have a roundtable with Nick New's class of 93 on franchising. It's like franchising a new economy. Then in March, it's like the time and the date is still to be decided, but we're gonna have a women entrepreneurs alumni panel. So if you have any ideas for other topics or would like to recommend a speaker, even volunteer yourself, please reach out to Melissa. And finally, we hope you will share your feedback in our post-event survey that you're gonna receive in an email tomorrow. Today, we are delighted to have Elia, class of 96, here with us today. Elia is the founder of Better to Give. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much, Atsib. This is wonderful. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. I hope everyone's warm-ish if you're anywhere on the East Coast. So the topic of this talk is building your startup team. Just as a general overview, I'm going to approach this not just as like a tech startup team. I think when people say startup, they think it's like a technology play. To me, the kind of thinking and purpose and goals, if you're doing a startup, would apply if you're doing a more traditional kind of a business. So startup, really, you have a new business, you have a new idea, you have a new project, and you need to think about how you're going to get it going. And let's assume for today that you have some sort of momentum and direction. You know what you're doing, you know kind of what you want to make or build and bring to market. So, there's the old saying that like the most important part of any company and any organization is people. And it's really true. You could build some sort of wonderful product, and many, many wonderful products have been brought to market, but because of the people or the team or some sort of dynamic, it just doesn't hit and it isn't a success. And if you can find a way through your world and into different groups of people to find others that you can bring in to help you build your company, you just have a hugely improved chance of success for your company. So with that sort of baseline, how do you approach this? What do you do? You're sitting at home alone or in an office alone, maybe you're in a WeWork, and you think, okay, I've got this, I really feel like now's the time to hit the gas in some level. Who do you hire and how do you think about your role within that world? And when one starts a company, especially if you're doing it on your own and you don't come in with a whole, team or momentum or people that you know from other places, but you're going to start more from scratch. One of the hardest things I think to do at the outset is to figure out what you, the founder, do operationally because you have to keep this train of your idea moving, versus how you're viewed in the market as to what your expertise is and where that fits into your company layout. So as an example, what I've done in the tech world sort of to date has been to run product, which means I basically do the building and designing. I'm like the architect and the interior designer, and the engineers are the contractors. Engineers never like that analogy, but I love it. So we're going to stick with it for today. So that's what I do from an outside perspective. I come in and I say, I'm going to be head of product. But when I'm sitting at home or at my desk, I'm really head of sales, head of marketing, head of design, head of, human resources, head of finance, head of legal, all of these other things that you sort of have to take on in the very, very beginning. So when you're looking to bring in outside people, how do you figure out what your real expertise is? And a lot of that has to do with thinking about, if you could outsource everything and you want to hire everybody, what's the piece you really want to hang on to where you feel that you're going to have the best ability to sell yourself in the role? Like, where's your historic expertise and why are you the right person to have that role? When companies sort of get going, oftentimes founders can move around a little bit. That's fine. But, you really ideally want to kind of grab and defend your turf. If you don't, often founders can sort of find themselves in this weird amorphous world where they're a founder, but they don't have an operational role. And that might be okay for some people, but it's often a very hard transition. I tend to not like it because it's my baby, it's in my head, and I want to be able to continue to drive the company, not just from a sort of, front person, president or CEO level, but really just move the actual physical thing or digital thing forward. So, you have to be mindful on how the market views you so that people buy in to you being the expert. That's sort of a funky thing to understand, because you want to know, if you're going to look for outside money, you need to make sure that you personally inspire the confidence in an investor pool, that they say, oh, if Chris is going to run product, but she's going to hire out a sales team, a marketing team, a PR team, or whatever, an engineering team, that feels like a good team that I want to back. If you're talking to a potential buyer to say, I want you to sell my product, say we're going to make shoes or something. And I say, I'm going to be the designer of the shoes, but I'm not like a shoe design person, but I think I have these great ideas. And I say, I'm going to hire a designer, but it's my vision. It gets a little muddy. They might not want to give money to someone whose vision is there, but might not have market proof of success behind it. So you really want to think very honestly and clearly about yourself, because once you know where you fit in this scheme, you know where everyone else needs to be and who you need, and then what you're going to do with them. So one of the clearest ways I tend to think about things like this is to follow the money. What do I need to do to get money? And there's sort of two sources of money, or two pipes that come in. Money coming in that helps you from like an investor or a third party that would give you money without having to sell something first, other than your vision. So there's investor money, or your own money. If you're going to say, I'm just going to hustle and this is my own savings, I'm going to start the company with my own money. What do I need to get that and get that going? And then I have this product, whether it's a shoe or a digital thing. What do I need to do to get people to buy it? My end user money. So that's revenue coming in exchange for me giving them the product. So who do you need to hire to get these things done? One of the things that, again, you need to think about is who's going to move the needle on those two things. If you say you're in a tech company and first you need some sort of proof of concept, assume you've gotten that far, assume you've kind of moved down the field. So now you need to have investors. Who do you need with you to shore up the confidence that you and your product are a great bet for people to make, so that they can make a lot of money later by giving you a little bit of money today? If it's more fundamentally operational, you need to physically make this thing and start selling it. So if it's a shoe, you need to have prototypes made and design made and have someone go out and take the shoe to stores and buyers and move it. So as you think about where you want to hire up, I think you really want to keep your eye on on money, because if you get a little bit lost in the weeds sometimes and you think, well, I just really need some PR or I really need some XYZ, you're going a little bit off the beaten path and you might get distracted. And more importantly, you might spend a lot of money hiring people who can't get you to where you need to be to really make an impact and to achieve your goals. The frustrating part, I think, for a lot of people starting out is it's harder to get to those people that can really help you build your company quickly. It's much easier often to find PR people, some marketing people for hire, those kinds of roles, because there are more people out there. And they're not locked up, and oftentimes they can be third-party vendors. So that's important to keep your eye on those two funnels, in my opinion. And there's also some very august entrepreneurs and investors on this, people in this world on this call today. So I think if there's other ideas, it's always helpful to hear. But as you go through kind of thinking about how you build up your team, you also are building a company. So what do you need to make a company function? This is where I tend to find the most bang for the buck is early on is outsourcing. And that means if I'm not a finance person, or I'm not an accountant, or I'm not a salesperson as a founder of X company, those roles, especially when you're starting out, can be outsourced pretty effectively. So finance, you do need to keep your books and you need to understand the money coming in and the money going out and why, and make choices about where you're going to spend money wisely. That's the first thing anybody, even a buyer of a shoe, is going to make sure that your company makes sense, that you're running it well. So you need to find someone to handle the finances. Luckily, there's a lot of businesses now. It's a really nice time to be starting a company. There are a lot of these smaller companies and businesses that support entrepreneurs doing all sorts of things, who provide the infrastructure and the expertise in areas like finance and legal, public relations and marketing and sales. So those are the areas that I think, when you're really first starting out and trying to build up your team, you want to look for some of these third-party solutions, and you want to go with people who know your space. So if you're a shoe vendor or shoe designer and you say, I want to sell shoes, don't go to a startup tech, legal specialist. That's not who's going to be able to help you. You really want to find people within your industry that have some expertise, that like working with younger companies, doesn't matter how old you are as an entrepreneur, but want to deal with some of the uncertainties around startup companies. So you can do finance, legal, sales. A lot of people don't think about sales as an outsourced piece originally, when you're starting out. But I've done this twice now at two different companies where we initially started hiring a head of sales, and the piece where we ran into friction, and this is a company that I think we had about $25 million in backing. So we had some money to play with, but we didn't want to be sloppy. We paid a lot of money to bring in a head of sales, and they didn't do anything because the head of sales was used to having their whole team, and it was just this one person, and that one person didn't want really to do the work that it takes to really drive a sales department forward by themselves. It is a lot of work. So we found instead a couple of smaller companies that provide really like outsourced sales departments. They get your materials, they come in, they sit in your company or with you for a couple of days or a week or two, you train them, and then they go off and they make email introductions, cold calls, whatever you decide your preferred method of outreach, and they help you understand that. So that gives you a nice, kind of not one size fits all, but really very effective and often economically impactful baseline sales force. So you can say, if this hits, we do have more people for sales. If it doesn't hit, we can add more people to dial for dollars and help us. So that covers, let me see, I'm just going to make sure I don't leave anyone out here. Okay, technology. If you're doing a startup and you're not an engineer, that's a challenging position to be in. So you need to think about whether you want to bring in your first hire. Is often, if you're a tech startup, if you're not the engineer yourself, it's an engineer or a development company or a third-party tech company that can come in and build your platform. So you want to be sort of mindful, if you're in that tech business, what role you play and where you need to be positioning your other hires around you so that you get your tech and functionality and product really tight to go to market. Manufacturing, the same thing. If you're going to do a shoe, somebody has to build the shoe. You need a cobbler, right? If you think back to Jimmy Choo, which is a women's shoe brand that's quite high end, the woman who started that company she wasn't a cobbler. She wasn't a shoe person. What she did have was a ton of money. So she went out and she founded this man in London whose name was Jimmy Choo. And she convinced him at nighttime to start making her shoes, custom shoes. And then she turned around and the two of them really became Jimmy Choo. And she took his name, essentially took his name and hired him to be the master shoemaker for her brand. So there's a lot of ways you can think about hiring around yourself to build up this team. Marketing, same thing, depending on how you're going to grow, it can be outsourced. There's a lot of digital marketing teams, which is, now a very cost-effective and impactful way, no matter what kind of company you're building, to go out and reach your audience, especially on the end consumer, but even if it's a business to business kind of a operation. Human resources. I always say that you need human resources much earlier than you think you do. And by the time you realize you need them, it's usually too late. It doesn't mean you have to hire them on day one, but it does mean that by the time you start to bring someone in, you really do want to understand from your own perspective and values, what does this company look like from a human resources and people perspective? So the culture, the types of compensation, the tone, how people treat each other. They're very different types of companies to work for, as I'm sure many or all of you have already experienced. Having thoughtfulness around that is a good thing. And then just things like design as well can be outsourced. So when you're thinking about what can you kind of push out and hire companies to handle, it really bears even more impactfully on what do you want to keep in-house. So who do you really want to bring in and how are you going to make sure that that person not only likes your vision, likes what you're trying to do, but honestly, they have to like you. I mean, ideally, they don't have to, but if they don't like you and you don't really like them, and you end up hiring them, it just does, it's hard. It doesn't work out so well. So, without being sort of Pollyanna-ish, I think it really can be hard when you're starting out. If you don't have a group of people you already know, you really are stuck going out and looking and meeting and asking for introductions to people and hoping that you find a little bit of a soulmate. It's like a big dating piece. And we'll come back around to that too. Okay, so where are you going to find these people, assuming you don't already know them? So personal introductions I find are always the best. So if I said to myself, okay, I want to go do this XYZ kind of a company, the first thing I do is start telling everybody I know. And it is a little bit of an everybody because you never know who knows who. And like some random person could have a grandson at home coding all day. And it's like, oh, I just picked up a high school kid who can build, something fantastic. Maybe that's not the right solution. Maybe you really need an expert. So places you can look at. So personal intros from your friends and colleagues and people in the business is great. Investors, whether they have invested in you already or they are just someone you're talking to and potentially pitching. Oftentimes, if an investor recommends someone and that person is a fit and you hire them, it doesn't always happen this way, but often that investor is much more inclined to really look at your company and consider giving you money. Other founders is a great place. I've had a lot of weird success when I talk to other people starting companies and I ask them, who are the people that you didn't hire, but were like second and third in position to be offered the job if your first choice didn't pan out. It's not quite bottom feeding. It's much more like, if you took the best person if the company took the best person that they had kind of found for their role, I'm interested in the people that they passed over. Then I don't have to pay a referral fee or any sort of other fee to a recruiter. So I've had some luck just asking for their kind of top rate cast-offs. Incubators or an accelerator. If you're in one of those types of groups, those are very, very effective ways to find talent. And often the talent's with other incubators already. You can either join up together or, maybe someone's incubator doesn't work or company doesn't work as well. There's just a huge talent pool around any of those organized entrepreneur groups. Honestly, there's a lot to be said for Facebook groups and other boards that are especially on Reddit or Quora. Angel List is another good one. There are a lot of internet groups and specialties where you can get some traction if you can show to people that what you're building and who you are is attractive. Certainly read the trade news. Every vertical, whether it's shoes or tech, has a number of trade magazines. See who just left a job, see who's doing XYZ. You just sort of, people take calls. A lot of us, even if we're older, we're interested in hearing about what people are starting and doing. It's interesting to us. So, you might not know me, but you could probably call me and I would probably call you back, especially if you left me a message that was really short, really clear, and didn't make me, go through some sort of hoops. Okay, so things to keep in mind when you're hiring your startup team. I think the number one thing, and this goes from dating to any other kind of relationship you have, but the fit is really key. You have to like the people you're with. It's very hard to start a company, even if you've done it a million times. It gets much, much easier, but it's not the same as walking into a big company like Salesforce or something and just having everything set up. Lots of things change, markets shift really quickly when you're in a smaller company and you're just starting. You really want to be able to like the people that you're sitting with and really have them like you enough to weather the tough times. And things can get a little squirrely when it's hard to sell. And sometimes there are headwinds that you don't anticipate, even the best of us. And there's certainly many people a lot better than I am out there. And so what you want is someone that you can sit and talk with and that listens to you and that you listen to. So sometimes I think when you're starting a company, entrepreneurs can feel a lot of pressure to build a team and to just get a body in a position. 9 times out of 10, if you just throw someone in there and you think, oh God, this person's like, it's fine, it'll be fine, they'll just like do the books, it'll be fine. It's like never fine. There's a reason you're not liking them. There's a reason it's not a great fit. And it usually comes to a head and then you have to get rid of them. And it's like a drama. It's like breaking up with people. Then you have to like text them. And, oh my God, you have to go into dinner and tell them why it's not working. It's a lot of energy. You could be selling shoes instead of, disassociating yourself with someone who's, busy, not like meeting their sales goals. Okay. One of the other things to think about, again, is why would somebody come and work for you? And that's the thing you have to remember. It's a little bit like dating. You can be like, hey, I'm so awesome. But if nobody's, picking up what you're putting down, you have to figure out why. So going back to this HR piece, what's the upside? It can't just be like, oh, hey, I'm awesome. Come help me, make my dream come true. What does the company look like? What does it feel? What is the importance of people in your company and how are you going to treat them? And how can you share that with people? So in your day-to-day activities, you need to have a good reputation. Maybe you don't, but you have to be really rich to be able to, avoid that at this point or really successful. So you want to find a way to make the offer of whatever you might offer to someone who you'd like to come and bring in-house very attractive. Whether in this day and age, it's flexible work environment, work from home, certain amount of compensation from a baseline and a bonus, all of these different kinds of perks. You really need to know what's out in your market as standard and where you want to fit in within that range so that you can afford, hopefully, to scoop up and attract the very best people for your needs. I really think that's one of those things that gets overlooked until too late is the sort of corporate culture, even if it's just you at a desk. There's a culture there. Do you call people back quickly? Does it take you a while? All of these things that are sort of nebulous become very clarified when you bring one more person in. And then it becomes further clarified and sort of specific when you start bringing 2 and 3 and 4 people in at a time. So one of the other early warning things, signs that I think is kind of easy to ignore or to perhaps misconstrue if you're an entrepreneur, is that if you're out in the market and you're looking for either investors or people or sales, and you're not getting any traction, and you stop and think, well, I have this great shoe, I have this great internet company, like why, like what's wrong? Why aren't people getting it? And I think many of us, our first instinct is, oh, well, everybody else is so stupid. They just like don't get it, right? And the problem with that is it's almost never the case. So you have to really think very carefully about how you as the entrepreneur share your vision, share and articulate your dream. And then you have to do it. You can't just say, you can't say that it's going to be great and everything will be wonderful and then do the opposite. There are a lot of people who do that. I've worked for someone who spent a lot of time telling me how wonderful the work environment that we were in was. And I was like, oh my God, where's he sitting all day? This is terrible. And so you have to make it real. You can't just make it lip service because people talk. So, you have one disgruntled person who's like, oh my God, Chris said this was gonna be so much fun. And meanwhile, she's making me stay till midnight every night. And I cry 4 times a day in the bathroom and like the sales goals are unmeetable and she won't hire the right, it can go on and on and on. So being thoughtful at the beginning and setting yourself up for, a carefully laid out, and then you stick to this plan, I think goes a long way. So that's my kind of first big piece about how you build or how you think about your team. One of the other things, and this happened on a company that I was actually the board chair of for a number of years, and I was it wasn't under duress, but I was a reluctant board member and a reluctant board chair, even though the company was fine and the founder was great, it was all fine, but I didn't feel that this company needed a board. So one of the other things that can happen is, hiring people is difficult. It takes time. It takes so much energy. You have to go on these coffee dates. It's much, much faster to go and find experts and say, come and be on my board, because most people will say yes, because it doesn't take that much time. It's a very low effort way to be involved. And if you're an advisor, you don't always have to do a ton of work. Sometimes you do, and the best advisors are very involved, and sometimes they're not. So one of the things that I think can happen is that when one faces any headwinds in hiring on a date for these day-to-day roles, like head of technology or head of sales, or just a salesperson or a marketing person or a product person, if you're not getting what you need there, the instinct often is, okay, I'm going to go get a board. I'm going to go make a board and I'm going to bring these people in so that they're on my PowerPoint deck and all my slides say, these fancy people who are industry experts are involved in my company. And there's 2 kinds of boards. One of these boards I think is a great idea to build. The other type of board I think is a terrible idea to build. So the board that I like, startups to have are advisory boards. Again, it's not a huge ask. You can bring in experts. They agree to generally be available for you on the phone or in meetings or to make introductions. It is worth saying they have to actually do it. Again, I've had a lot of board members come in and say, oh, I'd love to be on your board. And then they disappear, they ghost you. So, you want to be very thoughtful in hiring and asking all, your more senior or expert level people to be involved, because, sometimes they're happy to have their name on the deck, but then they don't do anything. And that's not always super helpful, depending on the person, but you really do want the help. So advisory boards are a wonderful thing, and it's a nice way to get a sounding board, but you can't really rely on them to do any work. That's not the job of the people on the board. They have their own jobs. You do need to compensate them often with stock in some capacity. So they feel like there's a win for them if they help you get there. The type of board, if you're a startup company, like a baby company, I really dislike are boards of directors. And I was the chair of I think there were 4 of us on the board. And I don't think I've ever been in a more contentious group of people in my life, bickering about a company that at that point didn't have any sales. It didn't even exist. It existed in a structural form, but nothing ever happened. And the board often can get started by an investor, often an investor, but not always, coming in and saying, okay, well, I'll give you some money, but I want a seat on your board. So if it's a very shiny, wonderful, seasoned investor, absolutely, then you kind of have to do it. This was, and oftentimes will happen, it could be a family member, it could be your friend's cousin who's got an extra 100K jingling in his pocket, and he's not perhaps seasoned enough to know that a gift is, here's $50,000 and, keep me posted and let me know how I can help. But what ends up happening is that a lot of the company mission and directive can get diluted away from the founder and taken over by the board, because frankly, not much happens at times when you're building a company. There's some fallow periods as you wait for manufacturing to catch up or something. And to a board of directors, sometimes that can be frustrating. So I think, you know, you really want to be very mindful as to whether you want a board or not. I also think it signals a weakness. I think if a company can build a board but can't hire capable people, there is a total misfit somewhere in the organization and how they're presenting it to the world. Because if something is really great and hot, and you know, you can smell the success before they even see it, right? So like a million years ago, we could have another coffee table things about missed opportunity, because I'm really good at not taking opportunities in the moment that would have been just monstrous home runs. But I'll tell you two of my most annoying ones. One is moda operandi, which if you know, are familiar with women's very high-end fashion. At one point, I was asked to see if I could join, and I was locked up with another company I couldn't. But this company was going to start a high-end fashion, like pay 50% down sales site. So you would basically pre-order something like a $2,000 skirt. You'd pay $1,000 now, and then you'd do the remainder when it came in. It had an amazing founder who had access to everybody and her own money. It's been a huge home run, right? That company, that's the kind of company, they didn't have a board. They just got out and they got 5 really great people to start it, and they hit the ground running. And everything about it lined up. They've never had a problem, maybe until recently, like attracting talent. I think they still have no problem. The other one is One Kings Lane, which is even more irritating to me because it was even earlier. But I didn't do it, but it's okay. My story is so far so good. But, you know, again, the founder lined up. She didn't have any industry experience in this particular vertical, but her partner did. So she had kind of lined up the pieces and her pitch, even in talking to me and saying, hey, you know, do you think there's a place for you to fit in this company? You know, what does it look like for you from your perspective? It almost didn't even matter if I joined or not. I just knew it was going to be a home run. I was working in entertainment at the time. That's a different story. But, you know, when things are going well for a company, people read it. It's just like it's in the air or something. It's almost, you just know things are sort of crackly and sparkly, and it's feeling good and looking good. It's like I was pitched really early on by Stripe, the payment processor company. And they had like 4 clients. I mean, I knew somebody who was early there, and so they came to pitch. And, you know, I just left the meeting, was like, I have no idea if we're going to use them or not, but I know that company's going to be a monster. And they've been huge. So that energy and that organization and that presentation, people notice. The people you're trying to hire notice. So just bear that in mind, that oftentimes you get a sort of a litmus test and a read, not just on you, but on your whole vision and presentation as you go out and try to find people to join your team. So that's kind of my overview of how you think about it, which is basically a half an hour way of saying it totally depends on who you hire first. It's really up to you. But those are the ways that I've seen entrepreneurs, you know, consider it and think about it and execute on it. Some very, very well, some less well. And a lot of this has to do with how people view you and your idea, and how presentable, not just sort of optically, but like sort of logically this company is. And then how can you get yourself out in front of the people and find the gems, because they're just magical gems of people, sometimes in surprising places and sometimes in, you know, spots that you wouldn't have thought to look, that you can stumble on. And when you find those people, I think the very best, it's not even entrepreneurs, but the best business people and the people with the most, I think, happiness in their career and success tend to hang on to them as we all do different projects. So I know that there are about 4 or 5 people I tend to go back to if I'm going to start something, because I've either done it with them before, or they've been helpful to me and I've seen them execute and I really like it. And the same thing, there are a couple of people that just call me all the time to help them, you know, kind of get to X point in their company, because we've been through it before. We speak a similar type of a language, and thought process is very comfortable together. And that's what you kind of want to think about. You think about your career, you think about your actual company and what do you need. And then you think about this sort of bigger piece of your life of who do you want to spend your time with building this company, and how do you want to, be known, know people, who do you want to know, and how are you going to be able to build a team around you to support your vision, which with every additional hire does become slightly less of your vision. It's not, unless you do a solo thing, which I think only the guy from Pinterest managed to get his like butterfly collection up online, and then it turned into like a $40 billion company, but he did it by himself, right, in his room. But he still has had to change, his vision. The same thing with the guy from Etsy or Facebook, which, has a long and august history that we all know. Every person is going to bring their perspective, their expertise, their weaknesses, their strengths to the table. So it is a lot like dating and relationships. And that's a good thing ultimately, because we've all had to at least try to be nice to friends and make friends before. So it's not the first time. It's a lot like that when you build your team. So with that, I will happily answer questions or keep talking about anything you want to talk about. So.
Yeah, Chris, we have like a couple of questions and thoughts in our chat. The first one is from Joe. Like he said, if Chris is open to it, Joe would love to get introductions to this outsourced sales service like you had success with.
Oh yeah, I can tell you the one that I did use the most is called Memory Blue. And they are I think they're outside of Washington, DC. And honestly, like, this is a great place. I have said to Memory Blue people that they should be hiring from Trinity, because what they do, their model is so smart. And there's a couple of other companies, so I'd have to go back and look, but that's the one I like. They hire college kids. It's a formal company. They have a huge pool of recent graduates, and then they have like a good, nice, pretty well compensated smaller tier of middle management. And the middle managers kind of manage your sales program for your company, but they deploy these college kids who are literally on the phone a lot. They're sending cold emails, they follow up and call. And it's a really great entry-level job because they do all the sales training for you if you're coming out of college. It's magical. And I tend to think, in a different talk I gave at Trinity a couple of years ago to the art history department, if you don't know what to do and you're all friendly and a normal human being from like a social perspective, you like talking to people, not normal, but like if that's a good thing for you, go into sales. You could sell Xerox machines. It doesn't matter, sell ketchup, whatever. But if you can sell, you really have an incredibly strong market appeal. So Memory Blue is one. And then if you look at outsourced sales companies like, and Memory Blue comes up, you'll find through SEO like all the others. So.
We have another question too. What level of compensation would be appropriate for someone to serve on your advisory board?
It depends on the company. It's like, I don't know, 0.5% or something. It totally depends. That would be very, very, I think, specific to where the company is and what their cap table looks like. So it's like less than 1%. You're not going to get rich unless you really hit it big and you stay on it for a long time, but it's a nice piece of compensation. It's not like you get dollars. You usually get some stock or some options, depending.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When establishing a company, how do you decide between working directly with a contractor or third party, like accountant or attorney, versus using a platform like LegalZoom or Pilot.com?
So that's a good question. They're two different things. If you're setting up your company, you can absolutely use like LegalZoom. But as soon as you start dealing with issues that are specific to your company, you need someone who's actually just knows your company. It's not an in-house person. It's like a law firm. What I would say is, I do think there are plenty of firms that specialize in very small companies that are not, hugely expensive. They won't break the bank. So you don't have to go get like a super fancy lawyer, but you do at a certain point need someone who's looking out for you and knows what your goal is, because especially if they're reading contracts, you kind of don't want some random person who's on LegalZoom who doesn't know your company well to look out for you. You want to make a thoughtful, sophisticated contract. So.
Okay, another question. How did you pick your company ventures? Was it based on a market analysis and evaluation of potential profit, or would you recommend following passions even if you are unsure how to monetize them?
Oh, this is a good question. So for me, I think it depends on where I am in life. When I had, and I think this is true, well, I don't want to generalize, but why not? I tend to think when you're younger, you might have, well, you can have more or less of a risk tolerance. So the first thing is, how much risk do I feel like taking? Do I want to spend a lot of money? Do I want to spend my savings? Do I have savings to spend? Where's my head at that? Because, all of these things play into risk. Am I doing this at nighttime and I have a day job? So it's really dependent for me. When I took the biggest risk and started a tech company and kind of bootstrapped the first bit on my own, I had a huge tolerance for risk because I had no kids. I was like running around in LA. It was the heyday, it was the Wild West. I could get a lot of service for my company on either barter or through options, and everyone was giving discounts. It was like a great time to wheel and deal. But this was a long time ago. When you're thinking about it now, I mean, market analysis for sure. Really all of these things come down to my first conversation with whoever it is that's running an operation. If it's going to be me joining another company, I have to like them. And if I don't like them, I just say that I'm not the right person. And then I have a list of people that I don't like that much, but I respect, that I send them to, where I'm like, go talk to this person. That's great. If it's going to be something that I'm doing again, right now I'm starting a small, it's a very small company. I don't even think I'm going to hire anybody to do much, because right now I have almost a zero risk tolerance because my time is entirely locked up on a couple of other things. So I wanted to start something where I could literally play on my phone and make money while I'm doing something else. I just wanted a background noise kind of revenue stream that kept me entertained. So it really depends on where you are in life. I think you don't want to go into something if you're not going to make money. Another thing that I see that happens a lot, and it's not a bad thing that it's happening, but it's very important to understand what you're doing, is figuring out whether an opportunity to start a company is really going to be a company, or is it a hobby? Right? So are you going to make money? You have to make money. If you don't make any money, it's not really worth making a company, unless you're going to make a nonprofit or something, which is not what today is about. So, you have to understand your economics. You have to understand how long it's going to take you to make money, at least, theoretically, following some pretty basic, market knowledge. Because I think if you're going to spend a lot of time doing something, it's great to love it. You definitely want to like what you do, but you really do need to make money. And you need to make a lot of it, preferably, because things are easier then. So that's always my biggest piece of advice. Make a lot of money and then call me. Hire me.
Yeah. As a product leader, what are your preferences for hiring full-time product engineering talent versus contract or offshore resources?
Okay. So if I'm running a product team, I almost always want people in-house. Where I tend to do product offshore or outsourced. Actually, I don't know that I do that much product work outsourced. Maybe if I was building a little tiny module of something that I didn't think anyone who works with me could do really well, or I knew someone who did it really well, I would kind of farm a little piece out. Where I often farm out work is on the technology side. So when I do product for a tech company, the majority of the time I'm talking to product people, but I'm really, frankly, talking to engineers. And so I've worked hugely successfully and happily with almost all of our tech team. The CTO was in-house. Our entire tech team was in Kiev. So the great thing is I could do a day of work. Just as I was leaving, or I'd stay late, we'd have a conference call when they were coming in to kind of do a handoff of baton. And then they would work all night my time. And then we'd do the same thing in the morning. And it was really fun. It's also kind of, frankly, it's entertaining. They're sitting in Kiev. It was always cold, or they were drinking some cool birch water out of a tree. I don't know. It's interesting to have people sitting in different places, but you do run the risk, if you haven't done it a lot and you haven't hired the right team, of some communication issues, sometimes some timing issues, you're not in the room, you can't, so as head of product, with some junior people, I do like to have 1 or 2 junior people. I think it's a nice way to help people build their careers. But I literally will sit there with a pen, tapping on people's screens, being super irritating to them until they move, like a pixel or 2, or make something the blue that I want to match from something else. And I'm like right up next to them, sitting next to them. So again, it a little bit depends on how you like to work and where you want to communicate with people and how. Sorry, it's a little bit vague. It's just not a one size fits all, but I like working with people in real life as much as I can. And then stuff that can happen overnight, I'm happy to outsource that.
There are a couple. Okay, sure, you go.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for giving the talk. You said something during the talk about culture and how important that is to sort of bring in the right people and getting the right kind of vibe going at the company. I was wondering, as opposed to goal setting, because that's something you talked about that could lead to negative culture. How do you go about, I guess, setting the right goals for a company or realistic goals for a company?
So, I think you kind of just a little bit answered it. Things have to be realistic. You have to be aware of what you're trying to do and what it takes to get there. You have to be, I think you also want to be aspirational. So it's always really cool to have a big goal, right? There was this, I don't know if people are saying it, so hopefully they're not, because it's sort of annoying, but there was this thing called BHAG, or your big, hairy, audacious goal. It's a little dated now, hopefully. But so people would be like, oh my God, we have to make like $1 million of sales in the first week. And it'd be like, oh my God, do you need to do that? Or maybe could we just think that there are 4 people here who are over caffeinated and tired, and maybe we could make, 250,000 real sales as opposed to 1 million bullshit things that there's going to fall apart the next day. So that's some of the cultural things. We, in another company that I was consulting for that did, again, use an outsourced sales team, this poor sales team, they got us something like 300 hot leads, right? Which is they called companies, and then the company would be like, yeah, we'll take a meeting. And the person that had been in charge of running the meetings for the company that I was consulting for was dreadful. They were terrible. This person was terrible at their job. And so the sales company would do all this great work, hand the ball, the meeting would be set up, and then we'd listen to a pitch that I was sort of stabbing myself in the head during it, thinking oh God, no, this is so horrible. And so that really kills the culture, because the person that was supposed to take the ball and run with that person wasn't a good hire. The company had made a poor hire. And so we had a outsourced sales company that was really sad all the time. They were doing all this great work and it never converted. It was just awful. And finally someone fired this person, and we could kind of reshape this. But it was hugely impactful on the culture in a negative way, because we were all just sitting here where are sales? These people are teeing it up and you're totally fumbling the ball. So that's the kind of thing, how you treat people, who you hire. Even, honestly, it sort of sounds hokey and stupid, but thanking people when they do a great job, recognizing people when they do a great job, right? My dad was an senior executive or CEO at a bunch of companies, and he used to have a bell he would ring when there was something awesome. And my father was from Milan and had a very thick accent. He'd be very excited, and people get excited when he got excited. And if you're a leader, if you're happy and excited about something, it makes people feel good. You have to remember that people work really hard. And they're working hard for you, not just for the paycheck, sometimes for the paycheck, but really, showing your appreciation, understanding where the friction is coming from in your company, if something's not gelling, and trying to kind of accurately solve for that and fix it. That goes a long way to kind of stabilizing and improving company culture. So is that a reasonable answer, or did I get at what you were asking? Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
We have question for time for one last question, but it's not related to startup. do you have any advice for taking an old or established business that has yet to modernize yet operation, like their operations, tech, marketing, sales, with an existing staff that is used to, doing things in the old way? Like any thoughts around like changing the management when upgrading process tech, assessing existing staff to determine skills gap? Yeah.
So, okay.
Something.
In general, and I'm not a change consultant. There's a whole department at like Anderson Consulting that's like change management and operations. I tend to not be very good at that, mainly because I tend to think that once I explain something once, if you don't do it my way, there must be something wrong with you. But obviously there's not. It's the same reason I should never be a social worker or any sort of therapist. So I tend to not like changing things that are outdated and telling people to get it together and go modern. It doesn't mean I don't think that they should. Two totally different things. At the company I worked for about 5 years, which just to clarify too, I had a day job for 5 years, but I had written into my contract that I could do consulting for whoever I wanted all the time. So that's why I have, like, if I reference something and you look at my LinkedIn, I was bopping around town, doing a ton of other things at the same time, which I think made me a better executive, which is why one of the reasons I was able to do it. We had a very big client that might have been called like Schmeichel Schmores. And they wanted to, it's a fashion company, they wanted to hire us, or they did hire us to do a bunch of work to provide the back end and like white label source for essentially a sales platform for their sales associates. Okay, so everybody at Schmeichel Schmores decided that they really wanted to change. Great. Then we came in and told them what we were going to do, and everybody flipped out because they didn't actually, I think, fundamentally think about how much work it was going to be for them to implement what we wanted to do. It just turned into a whole big thing. And so it became, we ended up kind of getting it done, but it was brutal. It's very hard to change the kind of fundamental structure of a company. There's a reason why companies can hire, all sorts of people, and, good and bad, and the company doesn't like collapse overnight, because companies are strong. They get their momentum going, and they're kind of a steam train, and you add your fuel, but it's hard to derail them. So when you're looking at an established company, unless the founder or leader is 100% in, it can be a very thankless, very long thing to do. If they are in, then it's super fun, because you get to like take it all apart and rebuild it and tinker with it and try to optimize. And it's a very interesting exercise. But sometimes it can also be a lot bigger, and these changes radiate out, right? Like ripples in a pond, and not everybody likes change. Most people say they do, and then they're generally not telling the truth. And that's okay. That's a very human thing to do. Doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that you have to be very mindful and very delicate when saying, hey, guess what? This like awesome thing you've been doing, no, it's not going to work. And, then people can get upset. So that's not what I like to do. If they don't want to change, I'm like, great, see you later. I'm not going to change you.
Okay, do you like any final thoughts? Because we're almost like not one. So do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I hope you all, well, one, I hope you found this, if not helpful, then at least entertaining for lunch hour. But I hope you have the courage. I think it takes a lot of courage to go start a company for anybody, even if you've done it before. Have the courage and the confidence to try. And, you're not going to go wrong, at least in building your own reputation, if you're nice to people and you do what you say. So I think that's sort of the biggest thing. If you follow through on your word, whatever it is you're saying, and you do it, you start to build a nice reputation, and then and that matters, So I hope you all have success and make a ton of money, and you can give a little bit of it to Trinity. You can call me, give some to me or whomever. And I wish everyone a lot of success in whatever they're going to do next or doing now. So.
Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Doug. Always a treat.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your presentation, time, and all. We really appreciate you taking your time and be here for the event with us today. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and be active in the Q&A. Please look for our post-event survey in an email tomorrow. And also, please join Trinity Entrepreneurial Network, complete your profile in the Bantam Career Network, and follow up with Melissa if you have any questions or if you'd like to know additional information. And thank you so much, everyone.